welcome. You are watching Around the World here on News 9 Live. I am Krishna Kumar. We begin with Boeing's Starliner capsule, which faces some critical setbacks as issues with helium leaks, maneuvering thrusters and a propellant valve has jeopardized the return of two astronauts, Barry Wilmore and Indian origin Sunita Williams, from the International Space Station. The mission's challenges highlight urgent fixes needed for Boeing's space ambitions. This report tells you more.
Problems with Boeing's Starliner capsule have upended the original plans for the return of two astronauts to Earth, leaving them aboard the International Space Station as teams look at last-minute fixes. Since its liftoff on June 5th, the capsule has had 5 helium leaks, 5 maneuvering thrusters go dead, and a propellant valve failed to close completely. The current problems center on Starliner's expendable propulsion system, which is needed to back away from the ISS and position it to dive through Earth's atmosphere. Starliner can stay docked at the ISS for up to 45 days, according to comments by NASA's commercial crew manager Steve Stitch. He said recent test firings of the thrusters gave mission teams confidence in a safe return, though tests and reviews are ongoing. A source who spoke on the condition of anonymity said internally, NASA's latest targeted return date is July 6th. That would mean the mission, originally planned for 8 days, would instead last a month. Even with the propulsion issues, NASA has said Starliner would still be capable of returning the astronauts to Earth if absolutely necessary. That is, if the capsule must serve as an escape pod.
Stand by.
If Starliner is deemed incapable of safely returning Barry, Butch Wilmore, and Sunita Sunny Williams, one option would be sending them home aboard SpaceX's Crew Dragon. NASA and Boeing officials, as well as engineers familiar with the program, told Reuters nothing about Starliner's current problems indicates that this would be needed. This is Starliner's first mission to orbit carrying astronauts, the final test needed before NASA can certify it as the U.S. Space Agency's second ride to the ISS.
Meanwhile, NASA is gearing up to safely deorbit the International Space Station by the year 2030, selecting SpaceX to develop the U.S. Deorbit Vehicle. This crucial vehicle, with a contract value of around $840 million, will ensure a controlled descent off the International Space Station, minimizing risks to populated areas. Once operational, NASA will own and operate this vehicle, which will not only safely retire the International Space Station, but also pave the way for future commercial space endeavors. Tensions escalated in Bolivia as armed forces withdrew from the presidential palace in capital La Paz. President Luis Arce denounced what he called a coup attempt against his government, leading to the arrest of a senior military official. The president has called for international assistance amidst this unfolding crisis.
What appeared to be a coup attempt by soldiers in Bolivia failed on Wednesday. A top general leading armed forces allied to him tried to storm the presidential palace in La Paz, with eyewitness video showing an armored vehicle ram palace doors and soldiers rush in. But they quickly pulled back in the evening. And the general, Juan Jose Zuniga, was arrested hours later on live TV, taken away and later replaced. A Reuters witness saw soldiers withdraw from the central Plaza Murillo Square, home to the presidential palace and Congress. People continued to gather, heeding an earlier call from President Luis Arce to resist the coup attempt.
This is a historic afternoon, not just because the people have retaken Plaza Murillo, but because of a failed coup attempt. I believe the Bolivian people should be at ease. All Bolivians are uniting.
Arce himself later appeared from a balcony and thanked the public.
It fills us with bravery, courage to keep resisting, to keep on resisting any coup attempt, because Bolivia deserves its democracy, which is blood, brothers and sisters.
The president replaced General Zuniga by swearing in Jose Wilson Sanchez as the new military commander and called for calm and order to be restored. Tension is building in Bolivia ahead of general elections next year. Zuniga has recently hit out at leftist ex-president Evo Morales, saying he should not be allowed to return and threatening to block him if he does. Morales is planning a return to power by running against Arce, his one-time socialist ally. Zuniga had also spoken to reporters in the square, saying that anger was growing in the landlocked country. Bolivia has been battling an economic slump with depleted central bank reserves as well as pressure on the Boliviano currency as exports of gas dry up. The public prosecutor's office said it would launch a criminal investigation against Zuniga and others involved in the attempted coup.
Amidst widespread demonstrations by thousands of Kenyans against the contentious finance bill, Kenya's President William Ruto announced the withdrawal of the planned tax hikes, yielding to pressure from those massive protests. This report tells you all about all the developments following the intense demonstrations across Kenya.
Kenya's President William Ruto backed down on planned tax hikes on Wednesday, bowing to pressure after deadly nationwide protests.
Listening keenly to the people of Kenya, who have said loudly that they want nothing to do with this Finance Bill 2024, I concede, and therefore I will not sign.
Ruto's backtracking will be seen as a major victory for a week-old youth-led protest movement that grew from online condemnations of tax increases into mass rallies. Demonstrators stormed Parliament on Tuesday as protests were held across the country. Police opened fire on the crowds, who later broke into the Assembly's compound just minutes after lawmakers had voted through the tax measure. Some demonstrators said on social media that despite Ruto's climb down, they would go ahead with a rally planned for Thursday, with many reiterating demands that he resign. Medics said violent clashes between police and protesters had left at least 23 people dead across the country and scores wounded. Edith Awino is a relative of a deceased protester.
It is very devastating because these are young kids. They were out to fight for their rights. I didn't see the reason for using the live bullets on them.
A Kenyan news outlet reported protests in at least 35 of Kenya's 47 counties. The unrest marks the most serious crisis of Ruto's 2-year-old presidency, and the about-face may see off the immediate threat of more action. But it leaves him caught between the competing demands of his hard-pressed citizens and of lenders such as the IMF, which is urging the government to cut deficits to obtain more financing.
Britain's Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Labour Party leader Keir Starmer clashed in their final debate ahead of next week's elections, exchanging personal attacks on their and their parties' credibility. Polls suggested that Keir Starmer's Labour Party is poised for a substantial victory, likely ending the Conservatives' 14-year rule.
Because this isn't just what's happened this week, last week in the Gambling Commission. We saw Partygate earlier in this Parliament. The Prime Minister himself was convicted and fined for breaking the rules which he brought in and imposed on everybody else.
I also think leadership means being straight with people. It means having the courage of your convictions, not changing your mind on every single position that you've taken and being upfront about what you want to do for the country. That's not what Keir Starmer is doing. He's not being honest with everyone about his plans to raise their taxes.
Because they're not being processed, they cannot be returned to where they came from. Can they, Prime Minister? If he wants to correct that, now's his chance to do it.
They cannot be returned. Well, do you know where these people come from?
No, he's not answering the question.
Do you know where they come from? Iran,
you can see.
Syria, Afghanistan. So when Keir Starmer says he's going to return people, is he going to sit down? Are you going to sit down with the Iranian ayatollahs? Are you going to try and do a deal with the Taliban? It's completely nonsensical what you are saying, right? You are taking people for fools, right? I think that these people should not stay in our country. They will be on planes to Rwanda. That's what I will do with them. You still can't answer the question. What will you do with them?
All the tens of thousands
all the illegal migrants who arrive will be processed and put on planes to Rwanda. There is a choice on that question at this election, because Keir Starmer is not matched my pledge to reform the Equalities Act, to pass new law. That is the only way to deliver on what Vicky says. And the reason he won't do that, I don't know, but he can explain, is because he's not sure, like I am, that when it comes to these matters, sex means biological sex, and that's how you protect female-only spaces and services.
Keir Starmer?
Yes is the answer to the question. It's very important that we protect women's spaces. But what I will also say is that I do recognise that there are a small number of people who are born into a gender that they don't identify with, and I will treat them, as I treat all human beings, with dignity and respect. And I'll tell you for why. I'll tell you for why. Because if you don't, you end up with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom standing in Parliament making an anti-trans joke in front of the mother of a murdered trans teenager. I will never, ever allow myself to be put into that position.
Meanwhile, in an unprecedented face-off, the two oldest candidates ever to vie for the U.S. presidency, Joe Biden and Donald Trump, are set to clash in a televised debate. Accusations fly as one candidate labels the other unhinged and a threat to democracy, while the rebuttal paints a picture of senility and corruption. Take a look.
Joe Biden and Donald Trump are set to meet for a televised debate on June 27th, unlike any other. One accuses his rival of being unhinged and a danger to democracy.
It's clear that when he lost in 2020, something literally snapped in the sky.
While the other accuses his opponent of being senile and corrupt.
He can't talk, he can't walk, can't find his way off a stage.
With months to go until the November 5th presidential election, many voters are still undecided. That raises the stakes for the debate, which many may view for possible moments of drama, rather than for policy discussions between the Democratic president and his Republican challenger. Here's what to look out for in the first presidential debate. Biden and Trump, at 81 and 78 respectively, are the oldest candidates to ever run for president. Both are known for their tempers and impatience. They're used to commanding the stage and have both been president, which means they'll likely see little reason to yield to the other.
The left. Will you shut up, man? Listen, who is on your list, Joe?
Biden rattled Trump during their first debate in the 2020 race, leading Trump into what was viewed as a poor performance.
I think that the country would be better served if we allowed both people to speak with fewer interruptions. I'm appealing to you, sir, to do that.
Well, and him too.
Well, frankly, you've been doing more interrupting
that's
than he
all right,
has.
but he does plenty.
Well, less than, sir, less
does
than
plenty.
No, less than you have. Let's please continue on.
This time, Trump may try to get under Biden's skin by mentioning the recent conviction of the president's son, Hunter, on lying about his drug use to illegally buy a gun.
Really?
And I resent.
Are you talking about Hunter? Are you talking about Hunter?
I'm talking about my son, Beau Biden. You're talking about.
I don't know Beau. I know Hunter.
Yeah,
Hunter
you know
got
Beau.
thrown.
But Trump has to make sure not to come across like a bully to moderate voters. For Biden, it may be tempting for him to play up Trump's recent conviction for involvement in a hush money scheme, but one expert said that could allow Trump to paint himself as a victim of political persecution.
I just went through a rigged trial in New York.
For Trump, the danger lies in saying things that underscore Biden's argument that he's a threat to democratic norms. For example, he suggested he'll use the Justice Department to target his political enemies.
When he says he wants to be a dictator, I believe him.
Democrats point to Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election and his role in the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. Political experts say both candidates should focus on issues that hit home with voters, like the high cost of living. Both Biden and Trump could be rusty. Trump refused to participate in the 2024 Republican primary debates, a decision that did him no harm, as he easily beat all his rivals for the party's nomination. Biden also has not been on a debate stage in almost 4 years. The debate takes place in Atlanta, Georgia, on June 27th, hosted by CNN.
NATO has chosen Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte as its next leader amid ongoing conflict in Ukraine and questions about U.S. support for the alliance. With Rutte's appointment, NATO faces some important decisions on its strategic direction and response to global security challenges. So what does his selection signal for the future of the NATO alliance? This report tells you more.
Mark Rutte, NATO's next Secretary General, is a fierce critic of Russian President Vladimir Putin and a staunch ally of Ukraine. Rutte will face the challenge of sustaining allies' support for Ukraine's fight against Russia's invasion, but must guard against NATO being drawn into a war with Moscow. So how will he run the alliance? Rutte has spent nearly 14 years as Dutch Prime Minister and cemented his bid to become NATO's new chief last year, while coordinating an international coalition that will deliver F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine and train Ukrainian pilots. He has been a vocal critic of Putin since Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine.
Speak out against Putin and Russia's violation of the UN Charter. Support the peace plan. Support Ukraine, even if it takes time, even if there are setbacks, especially if it takes time and there are setbacks. And tell Russia to give back the stolen children of Ukraine.
He says NATO must be powerful to counter Moscow, and other European Union leaders must not be naive about Putin's Russia. Rutte is due to take over as leader when incumbent Jens Stoltenberg officially steps down in October. Almost immediately, he will have to contend with the possibility that NATO skeptic Donald Trump may return to the White House after November's U.S. presidential election. The prospect of Trump's return has unnerved NATO leaders, as the Republican former president called into question U.S. willingness to support other members of the alliance if they were attacked. This was Stoltenberg in June.
Article 5 is a legal obligation for allies to assist in the event of an armed attack. There is no requirement for any unanimous decision.
It led Stoltenberg to propose what is widely seen as Trump-proofing by putting coordination of international military aid for Ukraine under a NATO umbrella, giving alliance military staff more autonomy to get on with the job and less direct political involvement. As Prime Minister of the Netherlands, Rutte is regarded as having been one of the most successful in the EU at dealing with Trump, in spite of the latter's sympathy with Russia. Rutte will oversee a widened NATO, after Finland, then Sweden, turned their backs on long histories of non-alignment following Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Now, passengers arriving early this morning at Bengaluru's Kempegowda International Airport face an unexpected ordeal after Air India's direct flight from San Francisco landed without their checked baggage. Flight AI-176's passengers, unaware until reaching Terminal 2, were left without their belongings, causing frustration among all of them, families and travelers. The Japanese yen plunged to its lowest level against the US dollar since 1986, triggering heightened vigilance in currency markets. Analysts and investors are now watching closely for an intervention by Japanese authorities aimed at shoring up the struggling currency.
The yen dropped to its lowest level since 1986 against the dollar on Wednesday. The US dollar traded at 160.39 yen, with Japan's currency hurt by a large interest rate gap between it and the US. The move alerted markets as they look for signs of intervention from Japanese authorities to boost the struggling currency. Analysts said traders were testing the resolve of Japan's Ministry of Finance and central bank. Authorities spent $62 billion in late April and early May to support the currency when it fell past 160. Japan has already raised interest rates this year to a range of 0 to 0.1%. The US rates are up to 5.5% mean investors are flocking to the higher returns on dollar assets. That's driven up the currency versus the yen. Top currency diplomat Masato Kanda said Monday Japan was always ready to take action against excessive market moves. But traders ignored the warning after the last round of intervention did little to stop the selling. There is a chance of a further rate hike from the Bank of Japan in late July, which could help support the yen. Any durable rally is likely to require Federal Reserve interest rate cuts. Friday's US personal consumption expenditure inflation report will be key for currency markets. A lower than expected number could cause traders to raise their bets on Fed rate cuts this year. And that, in turn, could give some relief to Japan's currency.
In the US markets, the S&P 500 marked 10 new 52-week highs and 6 new lows, while the Nasdaq Composite saw 41 new highs and 171 new lows. Investors are now focusing on upcoming economic data, particularly Friday's release of the Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, a key measure of inflation in the US, favored by the US Federal Reserve. This Reuters report gets you a lowdown on all the action on Wall Street.
Wall Street's main indexes closed with modest gains on Wednesday as investors held their cards close to their vests ahead of a presidential debate and a key inflation report. The Dow and S&P 500 both edged into the green, while the Nasdaq gained 0.5%. Economic data this week includes Friday's Personal Consumption Expenditures, or PCE, price index, the Federal Reserve's preferred inflation gauge. Adam Phillips, managing director of investments at EP Wealth Advisors, said core PCE, which strips out volatile food and energy prices, should indicate the central bank is moving closer to cutting interest rates.
So the market is expecting the month-over-month inflation print for core PCE to be up about 0.1%. If so, that's going to be the lowest print all year. On a year-over-year basis, inflation could be at about 2.6%, so the lowest in a few years. So this is expected to be a very Fed-friendly inflation report.
The Fed has been projecting only one interest rate cut this year, in December. But investors see a more than 50% chance of a rate cut in September, according to LSEG. Stocks on the move included Amazon, which rose nearly 4% to bring the company's market value above $2 trillion, the fifth U.S. company to cross that level. Among other megacaps, Apple rose 2% and Tesla gained 4.8%. FedEx shares jumped 15.5% after the delivery giant forecast fiscal 2025 profit above estimates. And shares of Whirlpool surged 17% after Reuters reported that German engineering group Robert Bosch is weighing a bid for the U.S. appliances maker.
Amazon's market valuation has soared to $2 trillion for the first time, boosted by a near 4% surge in its share price, which closed at around $193.61. The milestone has placed Amazon alongside tech titans like Alphabet Inc., parent of Google, Nvidia, Microsoft, and Apple. The company's robust performance, driven by strong sales growth in its cloud computing division, Amazon Web Services, emphasizes its growing prominence in the artificial intelligence space. Entrepreneur and socialite Paris Hilton delivered an emotional testimony before a House committee in the U.S., recounting harrowing experiences from her time in the foster care system and alleged abuse at a boarding school in Utah in the U.S. Her plea urged the U.S. Congress to prioritize reforms benefiting children in foster care, highlighting issues of abuse, including sexual assault, physical restraint, and forced medication.
When I was 16 years old, I was ripped from my bed in the middle of the night and transported across state lines to the first of 4 youth residential treatment facilities. These programs promised healing, growth, and support, but instead did not allow me to speak, move freely, or even look out a window for 2 years. I was force-fed medications and sexually abused by the staff. I was violently restrained and dragged down hallways, stripped naked, and thrown into solitary confinement. My parents were completely deceived, lied to, and manipulated by this for-profit industry about the inhumane treatment I was experiencing. So, can you only imagine the experience for youth who are placed by the state and don't have people regularly checking in on them? I'm here to be the voice for the children whose voices can't be heard. While this committee has the responsibility to move bipartisan solutions forward to protect them, I strongly advocate for the reauthorization of Title 4B. Families need resources and support so they don't need to come into the child welfare system in the first place. For children who do end up in foster care, we cannot allow them to grow up in facilities. The treatment these kids have had to endure is criminal. These kids deserve to grow up in safe, family-centered environments. I will not stop until America's youth is safe.
And that's all we have time for in this edition of Around the World. Thank you so much for watching. This is Krishna Kumar signing off.
There are beautiful golf courses, there are well-played golf courses, there are great greens. But I think we are a combination of everything.